All right, if we can, this is going to be a little bit different since I'm going to call the meeting to order since we don't yet have a P&Z chair or vice chair at this point. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. The first item is going to be the citizens' communication. The Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comment on items relevant to the planning and zoning not already scheduled on tonight's agenda. In accordance with Texas Attorney General's opinion, any public comment that is made on an item that is not on the published agenda will be only heard by the commission. No formal action, discussion, deliberation, or comment will be made by the commission. Each person providing public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and will be asked to state his or her name and address for the public record. Is there anyone wishing to address the commission? Seeing none, we will go to the first item, which is a discussion only, and it will be regarding the Unified Development Code amendments and Parkland Dedication Ordinance.
Make sure that's working. Okay. Well, good evening. My name is Jeff O'Shea. I'm the Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, and we are honored and thrilled to be joined tonight by Dr. John Crompton, who is a distinguished professor at Texas A&M University. He won't like this, but we call him the godfather of parkland dedication. He has written the textbooks. He has done this for 50 plus cities. How many cities have you worked on their parkland?
Oh, it's somewhere north of 50. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kept a record.
And so in preparation for the UDC update, we contacted Dr. Crompton because we have not updated our parkland dedication ordinances in some time. And so if we were going to do this, we wanted to bring on the name in parkland dedication across the country. And so Dr. Crompton has over the last couple months with Parks and Recreation staff has looked at our ordinance and come up with some of his recommendations for updates to the ordinance. So keep in mind, and he'll mention this as well, he's going to talk through parkland dedication as a whole. He's going to go into professor mode and give you parkland dedication 101 and then talk a little bit about his recommendations. But keep in mind, there's going to be some numbers we talk about. The draft you have in front of you is Dr. Crompton's recommendations. This is not set in stone. Those numbers, while they are pulled from our master plan and some of our most recent parks, and we'll talk about that, there's still some refining that needs to be done. So this is more an overall conversation about the parkland dedication section of the UDC and where it's headed. So I wanted to give you all the opportunity to hear from Dr. Crompton about his recommendations and also ask questions of him and kind of drill down on some of these items. So with all that being said, I will turn it over to Dr. Crompton.
Well, Jeff, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, a note of apology, and that is that I'm deaf. And I particularly have a challenge with high-pitched female voices. And I've got a wife and 3 daughters, and most of the grandchildren are female. And so, although it is periodically convenient, it's really frustrating to the other folks when that occurs. So please feel free to shout at me, and then it'll be the best way to communicate. I also have some affinity with the role that you play. I contested 4 elections in the city of College Station, prevailed in all of them, and so I've had a lot of experience on city council as well. And so I'm very familiar with some of the challenges that you're engaged with and have to resolve. And these things, in my experience, always come down to compromise. And so we'll talk about that as we go on through. So can somebody bring this up? What do I do? I'm technologically challenged too. Okay, so there we have it. Let me start it off by talking that, as I understand it, you are a city of fast growth, just as College Station, Texas, is a very fast growth city. And there's 3 ways you pay for growth. The first one is that existing residents subsidize new park development. And that is done through, obviously, through bonds and certificates of obligation or whatever. And that means the existing citizens subsidize the thing. The second one, thanks, Jeff, is you do nothing. And when that happens, you lower the level of service in your city. And so the third one, the third option is that you require new growth to pay for itself. And these decisions are, as a council person, many times you don't want to raise taxes. Then that doesn't get you re-elected and people are furious about it. But the decisions about needing to raise taxes are really made at the front end and not at the back end. In the back end, you're catching up many times on these things, on bond issues and so on. And if you make those decisions at the front end, it's much less expensive. And so if you don't react, if you don't put in these front-end expenditures, then essentially you're creating infrastructure deficits for people down the road at some point in the future. So most of us who run for election in Texas run on a platform of fiscal conservatism. And for me, that means that those who benefit from services should pay for them. And that's the bedrock, really. Because if they don't, then you're left with having to raise taxes. This parkland dedication stuff is essentially a user fee. You're paying, people are putting demand on the services, they're putting a generating need for additional amenities, and so the people creating that need are being asked to pay for it with parkland dedication. That's the principle that we're relying on here. Which of these buttons do I press here? That one, thank you. So let me first of all talk a little bit about how these costs arise. And there's a technique called cost of community services, which has been around now for about 25 years, and it's a template. And a number of cities, many cities, undertake this. And what they do is they take their city manager and their financial chief, and they take all of the items in the budget, and they assign those items to one of three categories: residential, commercial, industrial, or farm, forest, open space. So they take all the costs, all the revenues from property taxes, fees, sales taxes, whatever, and they allocate all of them into one of those three categories. And there's a template for doing this. And they generally invite the school board to come along, or the school officers to come along as well, because they're part of this whole deal. So about 10 years ago, I went or scurried around and had my troops collect this stuff. And we collected about 150 of these studies, which have been done in communities, mainly suburban communities, rather than the big cities, those suburban communities that have been done. And I just want to share with you the results of that. And so these are averages. And what this shows is the median cost, and my number of communities was 151. And it says that for every dollar in revenues the cities received, it cost 32 cents or 30 cents to service commercial industrial folks. And there you see why we all want and need commercial industrial stuff as a base for our city, because they're the positive taxpayers. The second is farm, forest, open space. And for every dollar in revenue we receive, it costs 35 cents to service them. And that's taking into account that many of these people are on use taxes rather than value taxes, rather than land value taxes. They're on use taxes. Nevertheless, the big item here, of course, is schools. And we all know that that's the big item on our property tax bills. And so, as one of my friends says, cows don't ride the school bus. And that's the key to why they're a positive taxpayer. And this is the one which we're really concerned about today, and that is residential development. And in the average median average for these 151 cities, well, for every dollar in revenue, it costs $1.16 to service. Now, that is not widely known by communities. In the city of College Station, what that says to us is the more residences we build, with two exceptions, the more residences we build, the poorer we get, the more it is. And that explains why, when you're growing rapidly, why your tax bills are going up. When you're thinking, hey, the tax revenue is going up. Yeah, but the cost of services is going up, and it's going up faster when you're dealing with folks. And so there's a myth which, my good friends in the development community and most of the time we're on the same side and we're trying to do the same thing. But this is one area where frequently my friends in the development community and I differ. They'll come up to the council and they'll say, we are taking this greenfield and we are building tax revenue for you, which will help benefit all of your community. Well, then they're telling you is the other side of the balance sheet, which is it raises the cost of providing community services. They're saying they will increase the local tax revenues, and they're right. They will increase the local tax revenues, but there'll still be a net deficit because the costs of services are greater. And they'll say it reduces the tax payments of current residents, and you know from your bills over the last 20 years in a fast-growth city, it doesn't. They go up. It actually increases the amounts that you get in there. So I want to make that point up front as we go on through there. So this was a cartoon I came across which represents this. The developer is saying, and think of the beneficial impact on the community. New tax revenues, new jobs, new businesses, increased economic growth, where those of us on city council are thinking more houses, more kids means more schools, more roads and more traffic needed, more police cars, more policemen, more fire trucks, more sewers, more, and those don't get talked about, whereas they should be talked about at the front end. So what we're talking about today is an exaction, and there's two kinds of exactions. The first kind is the legislative authority and impact fees. And I want to right up front say that parkland dedication is very different from impact fees. Impact fees are laid down by the Texas legislature, what you can and cannot do, and they give you exactly the stages you go through and how you calculate it and all the rest of it. And in Texas, there are 30 states that have impact fees. Texas is about the narrowest set of activities. I think it's just, if I recall correctly, it's road, sewers and water, perhaps, impact fees. Many states have 8 or 10 services covered with impact fees, particularly the more so-called progressive or liberal states out there. But in Texas, it's very narrowly defined. But that's a statutory authority. This parkland dedication we're talking about comes from the UDO, from the police powers. And it isn't statutorily laid out as to how you do it. What the Liege does is, in essence, when the courts have ruled, they'll put in a clause in the Constitution that sort of supports what's been said, but they don't lead anything and they don't give you the steps in how you put this thing together. So the evolution of parkland dedication is interesting. It started way out in California back in the 60s, 50s and 60s. It eventually got to Texas in about the 70s. The early ones were in the 70s. And it was limited to land for neighborhood parks. And then it got expanded a little bit because there was a particularly well-known court ruling relating to Missouri City, which is just north of Houston, where the judges in a case there said, you're assuming that neighborhood parks are positive. But what we see is little patches of land all around the community, which are vacuums of empty space, trashed out and of no value to anybody. And so that gave encouragement to the development community to attack. And their rule of attack is the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, which says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And that was resolved through the 70s in many states in favor of parkland dedication. However, it was not resolved in Texas until 1984. Texas was the last state to legally, through the courts, accept that parkland dedication was a legitimate tool. And there are two key questions related to it, which I'll get to in a moment: the nexus principle and how big the dedication should be. The seminal case in Texas was 1984. the city of College Station versus Turtle Rock, which was a relatively small development on that time on the edge of town. College Station at that time had a remarkable young attorney, quite extraordinary. His name was Lowell Denton. And Mr. Denton went on to be the chief attorney for San Antone and now has what is probably one of the best most reputable consulting organizations in government in the state of Texas. The lower courts had ruled in favor of the developers and said it might be okay in 49 other states, but it ain't okay in Texas. You're breaking the Constitution. So I remember going to a court hearing in '84 and to Austin to watch the Supreme Court of Texas rule on it, and watching Mr. Denton do an extraordinary job. I mean, normally as a city, as you well know, we hire outside attorneys to do these kind of fancy stuff, and it's not what our normal city does. But Lal took it on himself, and he turned these conservative judges around. It was a remarkable performance, and it indicated what a fine attorney he was going to be. And the state organization that year, Jeff, I know you're the incoming president, made a big deal at the opening ceremony of recognizing Mr. Denton for his contributions to getting that passed. So there remains two questions for the courts to resolve. The first was the nexus principle. The classic case is the Nolan case, the U.S. Supreme Court in 1987. Nexus means there has to be a relationship between the developer paying a fee and the resource that gets built, the park that gets built. You can't have the developer paying a fee here and use that money over there, where those houses do not benefit from it. There has to be a nexus, a close geographical nexus, and that's what that case stated. The other case, it led to the notion that you have to have zones in a community, and you're familiar with that in your community here, and you have to deposit the money in a zone, and then you can only spend the money for parks in that zone as you go on through. So parkland fees are deposited in a zone, reference to the park zone or community park district involved. Funds deposited in a particular park zone may only be expended for land improvements in that zone. The second case, which caused us to scratch our heads a lot, was the Dolan case, which was 1994. I guess my guys got their sixes and nines screwed up here. 1994. And the court ruled that there must be, and their phrase was in their ruling, rough proportionality between the requirements imposed on a developer and the needs for park use projected coming from the development. Now I'm looking at that and saying, now how on earth am I supposed to figure out how much demand there's going to be before they get here? Where do you start with that? And then they made it even more complicated, because they went on to say in that ruling, no precise mathematical calculation is required, but the city must make some sort of individualized determination that the required dedication is related both in nature, that means it's got to relate to a park, and that has all kinds of implications. It means you can't start using it for swimming pools, and in my view, for athletic fields or the specialist uses on the park, just the park, both in nature and extent to the impact of the proposed development. After scratching about for a bit, the rationale that I came up with, which I think has been widely accepted now around the country, is that people, when they come to your community, have an expectation of the level of service. That's one of the things that attracts them to your community. And so my thinking was, okay, then the mathematical calculation should be to maintain the existing level of service. And that, I think, has been generally accepted as we go around. There's no other rationale you can get it. So the old days of saying, oh, there's some national standards we have to meet. No, thank you. It's got to be individually calculated on your scenario. the old days of saying in a master plan, oh, we want to build all these kinds of facilities, and so we're going to charge whatever for a parkland dedication fee. Doesn't fly. It's got to be based on your existing level of service. That's the key. And I've been using this now for 15, 20 years, and it hasn't been opposed yet by the development community because there's no other alternative for it. So the Dolan case now has been codified in the Texas statutes, and the statute says, but the statutes very wisely state, the developer's portion of the costs may not exceed the amount required for infrastructure improvements that are roughly proportionate to the proposed development. So translated, what that means is you cannot charge a parkland dedication fee which is greater than your existing level of service. That's your cap. That's your cap. And so what I'm going to present to you today is what that cap is. That is not a recommendation for what you should apply. That's a political decision. That's the cap that you can go to, that you can't go over, and your political outcome will resolve the actual kind of a number. So, but this Dolan case was critical because it changed the game. Prior to the Dolan case, developers challenging your parkland dedication ordinance had to prove it was unfair. The Dolan case has shifted that. It said the burden of proof is on the communities to justify it is fair. So that was a radical shift in there. So the burden of proof is now on you to show the legitimacy of the rough proportionality that you're requiring. And again, that comes down, in my view, to the existing level of service. So that's how I've operationalized it. It must be individualized. It can't be an arbitrary amount. In fact, I'm involved in a case now with another city in the state of Texas, and usually I don't work for the development community for obvious reasons, conflicts of interest and so on. But in this case, the city's ordinance is so egregious that you have to counsel that I'm working for the developer and just hoping the city will not contest it because they'll lose. What they've done is pluck a number out of the air and stuck it in. That ain't going to fly. National standards are irrelevant. What other people in Texas are doing is irrelevant in terms of making your case. And as I said, you can't request disproportionate amounts beyond the current level of service from the developers. And you can accommodate different levels of density. Now, some cities say, well, okay, we're going to have a different ordinance for apartment dwellers because there's only 2 or 3 people in an apartment. Whereas a single family home, you've got maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 people in. So you should have a lower rate for apartments than you do for single family homes. And some cities do that. My own view is that that's a fallacious comparison because the people in apartments don't have yards and they use parks. You know, I'm in Austin here with my daughter. Well, she's blessed to have a backyard. So the kids play in the backyard. They don't have to go to the park. So I personally don't accept that you need different densities. But nevertheless, some cities they'll go with that, and that's their prerogative. So we now have been building now since about 2000. We have had land, but this whole issue about vacuums, empty vacuums, and nothing to do with it, they weren't getting made in the parks. And so we gradually introduced the notion of development fees, and those have been generally accepted now by the courts. I'm not aware of any that have been I'm not aware of any principles where they have been challenged. And so now it's not just about the land, it's about paying for the cost of the park on the land, but basic amenities, not specialist facilities in there. And then we've moved beyond the neighborhood level to the community development. Neighborhood level might have made sense in the 50s, but in Texas, if you haven't got a car, you're lost. I mean, nobody walks to parks today. I mean, they drive to whatever park they're going to do. That's the reality, at least in my city, that they do. So it's now all parks. It's not just neighborhood parks. And now it's improvements for all of those parks. So what I'm doing here in this pyramid is showing you how the base has moved up. And relatively few cities are at the top of that, where they're charging the maximum amount for improvements and the thing. But the number's growing. And some of these cities haven't looked at this ordinance in 30 years, and they're still down at the bottom. And in my view, they're not doing the taxpayers any favors by doing that. So you'll be familiar with that. That's your neighborhood park sectors. And that's your community park sectors. I don't have the figures at my fingertips. I should have checked them before I came out, but I'm thinking Austin has 12 zones. You've got, what, 16 or 18 neighborhood zones and another, dozen or 11 something community zones. That's way over the top. You don't need anything like that. Houston, I think, has 10 zones for 2 million people. Dallas is at about 8 zones for goodness knows how many they've got. I mean, you've got 3 zones, as I understand it, for your planning areas now. And in my recommendation would be use the same 3 zones for this stuff. You don't need all of this lot. I mean, it's just overkill to the nth degree and creates all kinds of complexities. And most importantly, it takes you a long time to collect enough money before you can do anything useful with it. If you've got all these little kind of pots of money, you don't buy anything, So that would be a primary recommendation. Get rid of these fiddling zones and go presumably with the ones that you've got. Now, when you talk about zones, some cities say, well, the cost of land in their different parts of the different zones is very different. They're radically different. And, I was working with the city of Austin for many years over there, and obviously in their core area where, you might pay $4 million for an acre of land, it's going to be very different from the suburbs where it's very different in there. And so some cities have a different fee for different zones. In my own view, that's a nuance beyond where we need to be, but some cities prefer to do that because they say it's more equitable in doing that. In doing it, so that's what they do, and you have that flexibility. So the first objection that people come to when you're talking about this, and I'm going to show you that using the numbers we've got right now, which may well be incorrect, they're just the numbers I've picked off the master plans and the census and so on for Pflugerville. Your maximum cap would be about $9,000. And so the moment you say that, people say you're driving low-income people out of the housing market. You're raising the costs on low-income people. Well, it ain't so. And the reason it ain't so is because the development community do not control the market. Market forces do. So if you've got a 9,000 exaction and you're buying a $350 and you're putting it on a $350,000 home, you cannot charge $359,000. Why? The developers would have done that if they could sell it at that price. They're into capturing consumer surplus. They're not into giving stuff away. So what happens to it? Well, they have to respond to the market. If $350,000 is the price the market will pay, then they've got to take it back on the cost side. So homeowners get less space. Instead of 1,200 square feet, if you're building at 300 a square foot, 300 into 9,000, so you're taking out, 30 square feet, you get 1,170 square feet. You're still getting a home. It's just, that's going on there. The flip of that is that if you don't do that, and you're going to keep the same service quality, you're going to use property and sales taxes with the bonds to do it. And those are regressive. They hit low-income people most in terms of proportion of their income. They pay a larger proportion in rent and a mortgage than wealthier people do. So you're not doing them any favors by not doing this. Sometimes my friends in the development community use what they call the term they use, I believe, is value engineering, which means, instead of first-class finishes, you go to second-class finishes. Instead of full landscaping, you go to part of it, and whatever. They take it out of the cost in terms of the cost side in that way. And ultimately, the cost will be borne back by the land seller who gets a lower price for the land. And again, that's long-term market forces. So let me just explain that. Before the exaction in this hypothetical place, I've got 100 units sold at 350,000, and so the developer paid 4 million for the land. After exaction, the developer can't sell at 359, and so that 9,000 has got to come out of the land price. The land doesn't do anything; it's just a cost. It's nothing else there. So he pays. If you crack that back, you take the 9,000 out of the 100 units and so on, and you come up with a number or whatever. I think the mathematics might be a little astray there. Nevertheless, it comes up, and so it's going to be a smaller number for the land, and it gets passed back to the landowner. It doesn't get passed on to the owner. That's the key point about this, which is what the developers are going to tell you. It ain't so. They don't control the marketplace. They have to respond to the marketplace. So let me take you through now, and I think you have one of these. Do they have one of these out there? I think you have them. Okay, so let me just take you to the last page, if you would, the appendix. And
Sorry,
I believe on these ordinances you should also, you should always have the numbers and the way you explain it put in the appendix. So please.
I hate to interrupt, but just
do.
before you move on, that
Yes, sir.
question of passing along the costs, I agree with everything you've said. I'm just curious, do you see it impact the developers' choices of what to build? So they can't charge more for the cost of the house, and they can't build a bigger house. Does that mean developers choose to build a more expensive property instead, because that can then be borne out more easily?
Yeah, so it comes again to the market, doesn't it? What the market will take, sir. And thank you for reminding me about that, because I said earlier that there were two exceptions to residences generating, costing more than the revenues they generate. Those two exceptions. One is high-end houses. Clearly, there's a point at which the property taxes do cover the costs in there. In College Station, when we did this exercise back probably 10 years ago, that number was about 350,000. It's probably 450,000 now. That then you start making money. And the second key element, which the realtors never talk about, but which is key at College Station, and that is the retirement community, because they don't have kids in the school system. And that's what drives the costs up. And so those retirees are very positive taxpayers. I mean, they don't get into trouble with the police, behave themselves. There's all kinds of stuff there with them. So those are the two exceptions for residences, high-end and retirees. They're people you really want to attract to if you're going to focus on residences. But to your general point, I can't tell you how the developers have reacted, sir. I've never done the research. I don't know. So here's how the numbers I used for your population was 65,191. I pulled it off the census charts. I don't know how accurate that is. The census told me you had 23,985 housing units, and the Parks Department told me you had just under 1,400 acres of parkland. So those were the basic numbers I was working with. So the parkland dedication fee is broken into, classically I break it into three categories. First is citywide, which doesn't pay any attention to the zoning. It's a citywide fee because everybody in the city benefits from the park. And I was told that you have two parks that meet that criterion, totaling 336 acres. So if I take my 23,985 number of dwelling units and divide it into my 336 acres, then every acre it has to be paid for by 71 dwelling units. And that's how I get my land fee for citywide or regional parks. So I assume then the cost of land, and again, this is a number that the planning folks gave me to work with. I don't know how accurate it is. Was 43,560 in this community. So if I take my 71 dwelling units and divide that into my 43,560, then each one pays $611 for the citywide land to keep that level of service going at that level. The next one was maintain neighborhood and community parks. And in my view, there's no point today in differentiating between those two things. People have cars, and people don't go to the nearest park. They, in fact, go to the one. Parks is an amorphous term. It covers an awful wide range of opportunities, and people pick what opportunities they want that day, and they go to the park. They drive to the park that offers that particular opportunity that they want. So to me, that distinction is a false distinction, particularly in Texas. And in big cities, it might work, but it doesn't work, in my view, in the suburban communities. And I'm told that you have this set of number of acres here, which is what Jeff's folks gave me. So 476 acres of maintained neighborhood and community parks. So again, when I take my 23,000 units, put it into the 476 number, use my land cost of 43,560, then the dedication fee for neighborhood community maintained parks is 866 for the land. So then I move to the next one, which is non-developed parks. And lots of this land is sort of your alongside creeks and floodplain and so on and so forth. And clearly using the same value for land of 40-odd thousand is not appropriate. And so I've picked an arbitrary number, and your folks are going to have to get a better number for me if it's available. I assumed 1 acre of land will be 10,000 for this kind of land in there, because so you divide the the numbers into it, the 23,965, and it comes down to 42 dwelling units divided into the 10,000 gives me 236. So that's my land costs. I add those three together to get my land costs for what the dedication could be. Now I've got to look at developing this stuff. And so Larry gave me the costs that you had recently for, I guess, Kelly Lane Park, a part of it that you had, you got bids on, and it came into just under 2 million for 6.1 acres, I think I was told. So it's working out at about 318,000 an acre to develop the cost of it. And so for mainland, for maintained neighborhood and community parks, the average of those was 50.3 DUs per acre. The cost, then you take the 318, you divide it by the 50 units, and it comes to 6322. The service level for passive non-development is, again, very much limited. You don't do much development on those trails alongside creeks or in that floodplain land. Maybe you put some a bridge or two in, and maybe you do some footpaths, some trails or whatever, but it's pretty much underdeveloped. So again, the number I've worked on in the past in other communities, 15% of the cost of developed parks. And again, that's a fairly arbitrary number, and I'm certainly open to you all correcting and changing that. And then you do the same calculation for those, it comes to 1128. So when you add all that lot together, the 611 for land for the regional park, the 866 for land for the maintained parks, the 236 for the land for the non-maintained neighborhood community parks, plus the 6222 for development of maintained parks, and the 1128 for development of non-maintained parks, you come to 9163. Now, let me just reiterate what I said earlier. This is your cap. This is what you can't go above, in my view, in terms of the amount you give. Where you go and land on is a political decision. That's a policy decision that your community will make as you go on. I've tried to point out the pros and cons of that, but you ultimately will make that decision. Let me speak as a politician now. It comes down that the easy thing for me to do is to keep this number low. That gets me re-elected. But it sure builds in problems down the road. And it means that in 20 years' time, suddenly you haven't got anything, the land's gone, the costs are through the roof and so on. So, you'll have your own views on that, but to me, the higher you can get up. Now, some communities, when they see the big increase from where they are now, stage it. And so I think it was dealing with New Braunfels recently. They staged it in over 3 years. In my own community, we moved it in. I think last time we raised it was probably 5 years ago. We moved it and we moved it over a 3-year period. And that's and when you announce this, you have to give the development community time to adapt to it. So you don't put it in overnight. You say to them, okay, we're going to start this maybe pick a time, in January 27. So they have time to adjust their land costs and their pro formas and so on to the new costs that you're introducing to them in there. So I think that's about time for me to shut up, Larry, and whatever you all want to shoot away.
Yeah. Questions?
So I know we're not, it needs to be individualized to the community, but if we're talking about similar communities, similar cities, is this in alignment with what other cities are doing for parkland dedication that you've worked with?
It's way out in front, and you would be at the apex of the pyramid.
Okay.
I mean, the problem is that some of these cities haven't looked at it for 30 years. I've got 87 ordinances. There are 87 cities in Texas that have an ordinance. I have all those ordinances. And some of those ordinances are $200 a house. Well, I mean, it doesn't do anything for you. So no, and that will be thrown at the political wrench. You're miles higher than everybody else. Well, okay, it's a part of the political decision making you'll have to make.
And it is a discussion I think a lot of cities are doing at the same time. This just happened to coincide with the UDC update, but a lot of cities are having this conversation because of what's happening with the legislature and some of the limits on the property tax caps and trying to fund these projects for the future. And they're taking a look at, this is how you pay for parks and recreation departments for residences for future generations. And so they're having to go back and look at where they are in their numbers. Those cities that their per dwelling unit is $200 are certainly going to be in trouble in the coming years. So we're not the only ones that will update that. So we can certainly, just like Dr. Crompton said, you really can't compare city to city. That question is still going to be asked, and we know here City Council is going to ask that question. So we will have some benchmarking. But at the same time, some of those cities are reviewing what they're doing too. So it may be way out in front now, at least at our maximum that we could change this to, but it may not be in the next year or two.
I think one of the challenges with this is that the development community are absolutely on top of this because it affects their bottom line. They're absolutely on top of it. The general community are very unfamiliar. There's only one story being told, and I put the comparison in one of my slides here. You're only seeing this side of the graph. There's a whole other section that the community are not informed about, and there's nobody informing on that side. And so, in my view, the political process should make that effort to put both sides of this equation forward in there. And that needs to be done if you really want your political leaders to embrace this. Otherwise, they're naked out there and subject to attack. And they haven't got the bolstering behind them.
What is our current fee?
Current fee?
Yes.
So it's not calculated in the same way. This is a much simpler calculation. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head because it's a pretty complex. Depends on the development.
It does depend on the number of dwelling units and development acreage. It's just those numbers are plugged into a formula, do we get a required acreage amount and a park development fee?
What we can do is provide you all with
Yeah.
what the existing is.
That'd be good.
A link to
Yeah.
it, and that way you can review, you now have the draft, so you can look at it
Yeah,
and see
I need
what's
to see the
different.
math of it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe even using an example.
Let me say there's a couple of other things in here too that draw your attention.
But-
One is
hold on,
that
before we
a
move on.
recommendation that you don't go into little parks and that you put a minimum of 10 acres in. Because with these caps the League is putting in now, this 1% property tax, and they discussed last summer even 2.5%. I mean, College Station, our growth has been 6% a year in property taxes for 20 years. This 2.5 thing is going to be disastrous for us, and so I think you keep that in mind as you go on through. Sir, I'm sorry I
No, it's
interrupted.
okay. So one of the challenges we face in my own neighborhood, which is here in Pflugerville, is that we have 10 or 12 total parks, 4 of which, I think it's 12, 4 of which are owned, maintained by the city, and then the homeowners association is required to maintain the other 8. And that has a disparity between the quality of the park depending on the replacement cycle of the HOA versus what the city's doing. The city's gone through with all their bonds and made massive improvements to the 4 parks that are owned by the city, but the remainder of the parks, we have slides that have to be replaced. They're 20 years old, and covers and things, and those costs are then ultimately borne by the homeowners, which creates other problems, secondary or I guess it'd be 4th level taxing issues, right? It's the homeowners association. We got to levy a fee so that those parks can be replaced and the amenities can be enjoyed. The reason I bring that up is, does a number like this, a cap like this, allow for in the same scenario 12 parks then to be maintained fully by the city, as opposed to a developer having to choose a portion that are city and then a portion that are just an amenity because they know that that's what sells homes that are then ultimately borne by the cost of all the residents who live there? Does this number help offset any of that, where the funds go to help the city with the maintenance and the ongoing repair and services?
All of these ordinances have some allowance for HOA and those kinds of things. This one is 25%, so that whatever the fee is, they get a 25% discount if they meet the standards that are laid in here. In terms of ongoing maintenance, this does not address that, and it cannot. This is a capital upfront kind of thing, and it can say nothing about operation and maintenance either for the city or for the HOAs going in there.
A developer comes in, they want to create a neighborhood. The requirement is that they develop 4 parks minimum, and those would then be city parks, right? That's what this, or they pay the fee in lieu, and then there's no parks.
Is it in lieu of, or?
The requirement for most of the thing is that very, very few are going to develop land, because if you go to a 10-acre size, you go to a 10-acre size park and you look at the number of dwelling units you need to get there, you're talking probably 500, 600, 700 homes. So they're going to give fees. That's going to be the key. And then that gives you the opportunity to provide something greater, because you can merge some of these fees in a zone to do it in there. But they do get a 25% discount because the thinking is because their homeowners, in fact, do choose some of that local stuff. So it offsets the city. At the same time, those homeowners do use the city parks. And so you're looking for the balance. And typically it's either 25% or 50%. And Mr. Adji said you were currently at 25%, so we kept it there. It's an arbitrary number.
So to that point, one of the recommendations that Dr. Crompton has, which has, I think, changed over the last several years because of the limitations on, future M&O, is, and you'll read it in here, is to not accept parkland less than 10 contiguous acres. So there would not be neighborhood parks that transfer from a developer to the city at any point if that's what we decide to do, which is a pretty drastic change from where we are currently. So that's going to be one of the bigger discussion topics moving forward on this, is do we do some version of that? And that is, like I said, it's completely a reaction to future limitations placed on our funding. And so this would be working more hand in hand. If those neighborhood parks are put in, they would be maintained in perpetuity by HOAs.
You have here a parkland development manual. In my view, it's redundant. You really don't need this. I think having this document and referring to it and referring to the master plan and so on, it just confuses the issue. I'd just keep it simple and put it in one document and not have these other documents floating around. But that's a personal preference. Let me make one other point, and that is this recognition that you can charge up to service quality rewards those cities that have invested strongly in parks and recreation because they have more acreage. What it doesn't, and it penalizes those who have not put in bonds. The moment that you use city money to expand that acreage, you can up this number. And so you can leverage that number that you use to build parks with city funds, leverages this number from the development community and the people coming in.
Yeah, so one of the overall challenges that we face, especially in this region where there's lots of HOA development, right? And the HOAs develop sometimes even on the ETJ, and so the developer, and I'm not going to speak to that. Well, in our case, I think it was ETJ. We were ETJ, and then eventually we got annexed. Is that not only do we have the land that's being dedicated, but then you also have the maintenance operations, but then you also have staffing level requirements that have to go up along with that proportionately across the expansion of service. And so where I've traveled and visited my family that lives elsewhere, essentially all parks are owned by the city. There's no such thing as a neighborhood park that's isolated within a community that's not accessible, or that's considered a private, or like, oh, that's our neighborhood, it's our park, unless it's next to the swimming pool that's for the neighborhood, right? That's the nearest physical example. The rest are public parks, and it's kind of a citywide complete package. And we're in Pflugerville, that's not the case, right? We have developers who are continually developing further out, and so they're putting in park space, but because of all of our limitations in the past that bring us to where we are today, there's parks that are being built today that are not city parks, and I don't think would ever be absorbed into the city management. And so does any of that, is this an opportunity, or does this number allow for accommodating those costs and then setting a vision of effectively saying we're going to try and capture all of our parks so that the city can provide city level quality service and maintenance and operations as a benefit to the entire city? Does that address this, or am I misunderstanding?
No, I think that's appropriate, sir. And I understand the HOA because I'm in one in Austin, and so it's in College Station, the city still provides infrastructure. In the HOA I'm in Austin, they do not. It's a private development, and when those roads need fixing, we have to fix it. The city's opted out of those things, and the reason they've done that is because of these caps that are coming in. These 1.5%, 2.5% caps. They're looking ahead and saying, "Hey, we can't do this anymore." The other mechanism that we've used a lot in College Station is the MUDs, the municipal utility districts. And again, it's fascinating to me. The MUDs in College Station has a property tax rate of $1 per 100. The city's is 51 cents per 100. We get all kinds of clobbering moving to 52 or 53 cents due to $1 in their developments over there. I mean, I think the city suffers because our residents are never fully informed. It's so difficult to fully inform. And I would say in College Station, there aren't more than 150 residents, ordinary residents, who understand city government and how it works, the ins and outs of it and so on. They don't. They've got an impression, and it's one of the battles we fight.
Yeah, so this conversation will certainly be ongoing. We were working on this a little bit before we brought Friesen Nichols on. Like I said, knowing that the UDC update was coming, we brought Dr. Crompton on. His schedule is dependent on the school year, so we wanted to make sure we had him when we could. So this will not be the last time we discuss these recommendations. And Friesen Nichols has this information as well, so we'll continue to talk through issues like that and others.
Wonderful, thank you.
Can I ask another question? As we're getting more information too, so this Kelly Lane Park, this is one that was just recently bid on.
It's being constructed now.
It's being constructed now. Is there any way we could see, because we're using it as, in this example, as a basis of the development fee. I would be interested in seeing what is actually being developed on that land,
Yeah.
and to make sure that it is an equitable example. I know it's a good example because it's our most recent bid, but we would want to make sure that it's a good, solid example for total cost over an acre. So
Yeah,
I think that'd be
absolutely.
something that'd be really nice to see as well when we're talking about specifically that fee, since it is the largest portion of the $9,000.
We
Oh,
can.
and then
Thank you.
last question. I'm sorry to have the last question on top of the last question. As far as the dollar per acre price, or the population and things, can those be updated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to update. So
So will the,
we mentioned at the front that some of these numbers will need to be updated. This was essentially giving you calculations based on what we had and allowing you to just see how this is calculated, how this is being put together. Like the dollar amount per acre, that's the existing dollar amount per acre from our ordinance that was updated however long ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Whenever that was.
I've never
15.
seen $1 per acre. I'd like to see that property.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
but,
right,
yeah.
right. So,
There'll be a way for us to comment to Freeze and Nichols.
Yes, absolutely.
Email?
This is only
Okay.
the first time you're hearing
Yeah,
this
okay,
one.
all right, good.
And we'll also send out the comparisons and such between what is proposed updated numbers plus what's already existing.
Because there's just a lot going on to the residential community.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's ways to get more money from the commercial. We're only getting 30 cents versus $1.16. So there has to be a way to get maybe more commercial to reduce the cost for residential.
well, that's a whole different conversation for another day.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure there is.
Dr. Crompton
Yeah.
can talk about that for a while too,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, because this was focused on residential, and I understand that, but I mean, there's
Yeah.
a way to, I believe.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
All right.
Yeah, we have
Thank
such
you
great
all.
park spaces,
Okay.
so this is exciting. So.
Yep.
Okay, and with that, we're going to adjourn this meeting at 6:58. We'll start back up with regular session in just a moment.
All right. Good evening, everybody. The meeting is called to order at 7:05. Let's see here. Any absent commission members? Are we all here?
Teresa's here.
Teresa.
Teresa, what's her last name? Teresa Adkins is absent. The citizen communication, item 2. The Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comment on items relevant to the Planning and Zoning Commission not already scheduled on tonight's agenda. In accordance with the Texas Attorney General's opinion, any public comment that is made on an item that is not on the published agenda will only be heard by the Commission. No formal action, discussion, deliberation, or comment will be made by the Commission. Each person providing public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and will be asked to state his or her name to address for the public record. And it looks like we have one person here. I'm going to call, I believe it's Urcha Dunbar Crespo to the... Oh, I'm so sorry, 7. I apologize. Never mind. Is there anybody that is willing to or wishing to address the commission at this time? All right. Item 1, item 3 is our presentation from Dr. Yasmin Turk for Article 3A, presentation regarding board, commission, and committee policy and procedure.
All right, good evening, new commissioners and returning commissioners. I am glad to be here tonight just to give you an overview of the Commission's activities and framework, and these were also included in the email that I sent you. So a little bit about the Planning and Zoning Commission, 7 members with 2-year terms and appointed by council and serving without compensation. And together you will provide recommendations to council on planning, zoning, and development matters that shape our community. And here you are with 2-year terms. This is the current commission with expected expirations listed. This information is also available on our City of Pflugerville website. This is a little bit about the things that you'll be doing. Some of them will be reviewing zoning cases and looking at plats for subdivisions. And one of the things that you'll be doing is working on the 5-year capital improvements plan and the comprehensive plan, which are kind of the guides to the bigger operation of the city. As well as this year, we are working on updating the Unified Development Code, the UDC, so you'll have an important role to play in that as well. Commission typically meets on the first Monday of each month, and this shows the adopted dates for this year. On Mondays where there is a holiday on the first Monday, Commission moves to the 3rd Monday of the month, and there is no meeting in July. And this is the Planning and Development Services Department and the teams that are on it: code enforcement, planning, inspection, leadership, administration, and the director and assistant director. And though you will most often be interacting with the planning team here at Planning and Zoning Commission, it's really a team effort that this group does behind the scenes to review applications, ensure compliance with city code, support public meetings, help guide development in a way that aligns with the community's goals. And so this is really the team that supports a lot of the work that comes before you. And this is where applications begin. Online on our portal is where applications are submitted. And from there, they are reviewed, fees are assessed, questions are answered. And it's really where most of the items that are coming before you will originate. And I included this visual in your packets as well that goes through the process of development. And there's one that shows with public infrastructure, and there's one that shows without public infrastructure. And this process is really important because it really makes sure that applications are reviewed very substantially, make sure that all the issues are addressed, hopefully before ever coming to you in planning and zoning. And the Aspire Pflugerville 2040 Comprehensive Plan is kind of the long-range policy guide for growth and development in the city. It reflects the community's vision for land use, transportation, housing, parks, and economic development over the next several decades until 2040. And this plan is especially important for you because it provides the framework used to evaluate zoning cases, subdivision plats, and development proposals. And when you make recommendations, Aspire 2040 is usually referenced in the recommendations coming from the city staff to make sure it's in alignment with that Aspire Pflugerville 2040 plan. And for the zoning process, it begins with a required pre-application meeting with staff to review the request and identify any potential issues early on. And from submittal to final action, the process typically takes about 70 to 90 days, so it is a pretty substantial process. And as part of the public engagement process for zoning, it requires notice that goes out of the request, that it's published in the local newspapers, that there are actual physical letters mailed to residents that or to property owners within 500 feet of the site. Signs are posted physically on the property to inform the public of proposed zoning changes. And then the request goes through public hearings with planning and zoning, and then also through city council before it concludes. And if it's approved, it would be adopted with an ordinance that would enact that zoning change. I don't want to get too far into the weeds with the subdivision review, but I did want to include a few slides that show kind of how land is divided and how new development is laid out. Applications are reviewed by staff to ensure that they meet city standards for infrastructure, access, utilities, drainage, public services, and it's both an administrative and a technical process. And there are times when they might come before you. And this slide I really wanted to include to show how it goes from the bigger picture of how a neighborhood is laid out into the more specific, the preliminary plan that gives you an understanding of the overall community, and the preliminary engineering to the final plat, with which solidifies the layout and the details for things like addressing. And these are also things that the planning team reviews, looking at the project elements. It gives you more of an idea of some of the things that are reviewed, like landscape, traffic control plans, parking, architecture, lighting, and the platting of infrastructure. In the development process, this shows building architecture, and we have very specific requirements in Pflugerville for in our unified development code for things like projections and recesses, screening of mechanical equipment, pedestrian spaces required, and like in this example where there's a gas station, some things that are that we require in Pflugerville are elevated design standards, which show which enhance the appearance of land use in our community. Things like pitched roofs that are required, pillars required to be encased in masonry, banding of gas station is to be complementary to the primary building and can't be used as signage, and limitations on logos and things like that. And Planning and Development Services works really closely with departments across the city to review applications and to guide development in a very coordinated way. This includes collaboration with engineering, transportation, utilities, parks, fire, police, and legal, among others. Each department provides subject matter expertise to ensure that proposed projects are safe, functional, and consistent with city standards. And this cross-department coordination helps identify potential issues early on and improves project design, and ensures that recommendations brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission reflect a comprehensive citywide perspective rather than a single department's review. Does anybody recognize this picture? It's a Pflugerville Parkway when it was expanded. That was a little quiz, fun fact quiz. And this right here is amazing. It's on our website. It is the development activity map. And if you ever see dirt moving around Pflugerville, you can go to pflugervilletx.gov/maps, and you can find the development activity map and find out what is going on where, find out information on the projects, you know, what is going on and what's happening there. And it's a really good resource to look at to get an overall picture of what's happening in Pflugerville, what's coming up in Pflugerville, and also gives you access to things like the capital improvement projects and zoning districts. You can get a good sense of where things are intended to be. And then this is our final picture of the Planning and Development Services Department. I really just wanted to celebrate the people who make it all happen. And this kind of captures a little bit about our energy and our teamwork and who all the people are that are working hard to make sure that the information that is brought to you is really comprehensive and hopefully meets all of the requirements before it even comes to you. And that's all I have. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, item 4A, discuss and consider action to appoint a chair and a vice chair. I will accept a motion, a second, to approve whoever is recommended.
Are you running?
I guess I'm sitting here.
All right, let's do number one.
Okay.
I vote for you.
Oh, thank you.
I think you have to recommend, oh, yeah, you have to recommend first.
Nominate.
Oh, okay. First, second.
So we have a recommendation. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it. Thank you. Now we need a vice chair. I'll take a nomination for vice chair, or a recommendation for a vice chair, excuse me.
I'd like to try.
All right, we have a recommendation.
I'll second it.
All right.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Congratulations.
Move on over.
Don't have to move over.
Let's keep moving.
All right, item 5, consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the commission and will be enacted by one motion. These items include preliminary and final plats where staff has found compliance with all minimum subdivision regulations. All items approved by consent are approved with any and all staff recommendations. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If any commissioner desires to discuss an item on the consent agenda, it will be removed to the regular agenda for further consideration. Are there any items the commission wishes to remove from the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I have to read each line, is that correct? All right, item 5A, approve the Planning and Zoning Commission minutes for December 1, 2025 regular meeting. Item 5B, approving a final plat for Ledetta Miriam EOTC, a 4.78 acre tract of land out of the John Van Winkle Survey, Travis County, Texas, FP 2025-000493. And item 5C, approving a preliminary plan for the Farm subdivision, a 16.759 acre lot or tract out of the Peter Conrad Survey number 71, abstract number 200, situated in Travis County, PP 2025-000452. I'll accept a motion and a second to approve items 5A, B, and C. All those in favor? Or I need a motion, excuse me.
Motion to approve?
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Item 6, discuss and consider. Items on the consent agenda may be pulled and moved to the regular agenda if the commission requires discussion on 8 items. Since there are none, we'll move to item 6A. Discuss and consider action regarding an application for an architectural waiver for a property addressed as 102 North First Street to be known as I-Ride Architectural Waiver, ARC 2025-00560.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. So this is another one of those pieces that the Planning and Zoning Commission gets to do is review architectural waivers. So that's one of the powers that does come to you all when there is a waiver that's needed from architecture. Specifically tonight, we're going to be talking about an architectural waiver for property that's in the downtown district. So this is at 102 North First Street. It's the property that's identified on your screen there with the gold band around it. It's generally at the southwest corner of Main Street and First Street. It's approximately 6,000 or so square foot building that's on that property, as well as unimproved like paved surface that's out there. Tonight we're talking about the building architecture on it, and we'll go through a little bit of history on that property and then talk about the waiver itself. So thanks to Google, we have the opportunity to go to Street View and be able to pull out some historic images. And so on the screen here on the right-hand side, you can see from January 2009 what the site looked like at that time. And then on the left-hand side is May of 2024, what it looks like then. So on the right-hand side, you see the different trailers there. There was a company that operated at that location. It was known as Princess Craft. They sold and repaired, maintained recreational trailers. Then if you could see the building back there on the backside, if you look over on the left-hand side in 2024, the property had exchanged hands. And as you can see, the building itself, there was not any additional improvements made to it. It's generally consistent with what we see out there today. So additional background on it, based on what I found in Travis Central Appraisal District, the building is roughly from the 1970s. It's a prefabricated metal building. In the 1990s, as I mentioned, Princess Craft had purchased the property or acquired the property and then started to utilize it for their recreational trailer sales and service. The city in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, we created downtown code regulations. At that time, we called it the Central Business District, and we included regulations on if we were going to have buildings be constructed within downtown, what did we want to see it look like? If things were redeveloped, what would it look like? So that was all part of the Central Business District that was created in 2004 and then later amended in 2006. Fast forward to 2020, we changed the name. Instead of it being called the Central Business District, we now call it the Downtown District. We added some additional sub-districts within there and adjusted the regulations in there. Tonight we're talking about some of the district regulations that are included in there, specifically related to how commercial developments, what that architecture needs to look like. Also in 2020, there was new ownership based on what I find in Travis Central Appraisal District. The properties changed hands. There was no certificate of occupancy established. There's still not a current certificate of occupancy for that property. And so when we were having some conversations just this past year about a new user wanting to go into that facility, it was found that that property basically is, per our Unified Development Code, been considered abandoned. And what that means is that anything that wants to go into that facility now needs to come into compliance. The site itself, the building, will need to come into compliance with the current regulations. So the applicant has come forward and they identified that they wanted to do something come into that facility. We identified what those different development regulations were, identified also what the architecture requirements are inside of the downtown district, and on the screen identifies what those two different styles are for commercial development within the downtown district. We have the Queen Anne on the left-hand side, and we have the Richardsonian Romanesque on the right-hand side. And those are the two styles that are permitted in the downtown district today. So that's quite different than what the building looks like under the current configuration. So one of the other options, as I mentioned, is that an applicant can come before the Planning and Zoning Commission for a waiver, for an architectural waiver. And these bullet points that are listed on the screen are also included in your packet, but these are basically the items that you would be using for considering whether or not an architectural waiver should be considered. The first one is to look at whether or not the proposed architecture is compatible with the existing buildings within the area, looking at whether or not it's representative of the desired building form, materials, and aesthetics of the area, whether granting a waiver, whether that literal enforcement would result in an unnecessary hardship, and then also whether or not the waiver, granting the waiver is not contrary to the public interest and that the spirit of the code is preserved. So in looking at what the applicant has proposed, they have identified, and I should take a pause now. Inside of your packet, there was a number of renderings that were included in it. I want to make sure that everybody's clear that we're not talking about the site improvements that were included in there, but we're talking about the architecture of the building itself. So the site improvement component is something that they included to show that they recognize the requirements that are in place and that they would need to come into compliance with. But that's not something that we're considering tonight. Tonight we're just looking at the architecture. So they've proposed to utilize and maintain the existing facade, take the same building and be able to utilize that for a proposed office. They've proposed to paint the existing facade to clean it back up, to remove the opaque overhead garage doors that you see on the north side of the building that would face towards Main, replace those with overhead doors that have the glass panes in them so that they're transparent and the light can filter through. They've also proposed to enhance the corner there at the northeast corner of the building so that it would enhance the building entrance as well as offer some awning on there. This is different than what the current downtown district regulations are. And when they were evaluating it, to be able to move into this location and to comply with the regulations, they would ultimately have to remove the building and start completely over, or they would need to look at establishing a false facade to create the required 2-story minimum facade that's on the buildings and to meet the styles. This is another image that was included in your packet. Again, it just demonstrates what the elements that they're proposing to make the adjustment. Again, this the top picture is of the north facade, making changes to those garage overhead doors and making a change to the building entrance. The bottom left facade is the west elevation. No changes are proposed there other than the paint. And the east elevation is the side that faces towards First Street. Would also see head-in parking. That's the facade that would also see the improvements for the building entrance. This is a concept. If the architecture, if they're able to move into this facility, this is kind of a concept of what they're looking to do on the inside of their building. This is just a rendering to provide you with an example of what it could look like on the inside and how their operations would work. But with the garage doors being clear glass, it provides the light into their area so that they can have a useful workspace. Interior is not something we're worried about tonight, just the exterior. So when the applicants came forward and we review our codes and we start to look at what is the condition of the buildings, we've written a code so that it could create uniformity inside of the downtown district. And we looked, when the downtown district regulations were established for the architecture, we looked at the different buildings that were on Main Street and how to see those buildings come alive and then have that continuation. In this situation, we have a building that has been sitting without an occupancy since roughly 2020 or so. It's a building that has also existed within the downtown area since roughly the 1970s. We have a picture that shows you back in the 1990s with the trailers there. It's just been sitting at this point. This would provide an opportunity for a new user to be able to go into this facility, to be able to paint it and to put some improvements in it, to bring life back into that facility in an interim condition. In the future, when it became more viable to take down the building and rebuild or say build up on the other sides of the property, that would be another opportunity for them to look at constructing a new building to meet all of the minimum architectural requirements. The removal of the building completely would be a significant cost. It would also, that would be an option for them to do, is to completely remove it and rebuild a new building. The other thing, as I mentioned previously, was to put a facade on it, which may end up being a false facade, which may not meet quite what we were intending for it to be. So, in review of all of those different things, staff has come to a recommendation of approval of the proposed waiver with the designs that they've proposed at this point. And so that a new business would be able to enter into this facility, and then the current location would be able to be open for others to come into. So kind of went around through a bunch of stuff there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. The applicants are also here to speak if you have questions for them.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So I have a question about the metal building. I think it was 2020 where we were involved, or I came to be aware of reconditioning a metal building, an existing metal building that had been considered abandoned, and the new use was going to require just some facade updates, and it's almost the exact same shape and even the same color. So at the time, if I remember correctly, there was some landscape requirement that was necessary, and then also to the building itself, it had to be something like 50% stone. Like a stone facade had to go up to, say, 50% of the overall height of the elevation of that particular side, and comply with whatever, natural stone was around the area or that kind of thing. Is that particular code still a requirement elsewhere, or has that been changed?
So the materials for downtown are applicable in downtown, and that was based on the way that it was identified. We went through a process of identifying that this was a historic area for prior to 2019, I believe it is. So in that regard, yes, that piece would be there. The designs that they would have to comply with to meet the downtown district is that, which is
Understood.
different than the other location.
Which is like, it was GB1, I think, is the issue. So, was there any discussion with the staff or the applicant about a middle ground, right, where you say, well, it's a metal building that there's almost an identical property currently being renovated that is elsewhere, right? That I think has to meet that minimum standard. Was that ever presented, or was that ever a thought that y'all went through? Or you just said, well, it's been there so long, and it's kind of part of the.
Yeah, we did not compare other buildings to it. It was basically, this is what the architectural requirements would be, the minimum requirement would be, and then what they had presented was this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So other metal buildings not downtown and are new have to have stone.
They do not, actually. So the masonry requirement is not something that we can enforce in an area that's not
Downtown. Okay, so that's just, you would like to have it,
That's correct.
but you don't.
It's
So other
within-
buildings can look like this building, so it won't be, okay.
There's architectural requirements, there's articulation and projections and recesses that are required to be met, but the
Okay.
material requirement is different.
Okay, all right, got it. I just the reason why I ask is because I don't want like all other metal buildings now to have more stone facade or a masonry facade, and then this one not. Not that I'm not opposed, I'm not opposed to this, just asking that question.
This might be a question more, I don't know if we can ask the team, but has there been any discussion on maybe having a mural of some kind on, it's directly adjacent to West Pecan. You can see kind of the corner there, West Pecan's mural. Just curious when it comes to facade, if that's been a part of the discussion.
I can speak to the mural components would be going through like the art
We're doing
commission,
that
and so
anyhow,
that
right?
would be something else that we would need to do in a separate way, but.
Oh, okay.
But this is just architectural, just
Yeah.
not demolishing the building, just
Right.
making it pretty.
Okay.
Or
Because when it comes to material, I will say that is a very nice blank side of the wall right there that look great with a mural. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
For my own clarification, what is the boundaries of the downtown district? Where does it start and stop? What defines the downtown district in terms of?
So, off the top of my head, I think we extend, the downtown district goes all the way to 10th Street. And then it goes to the east end to 685.
Okay.
Goes down south on Dessau just a little bit. We have an area that's called Soto. It's the southern downtown area. I'll get you a map. I should have included it, but
The motivation behind the question is similar to what was just asked. Are there other buildings currently in process or plan that is going to have that's going to be compliant to the look, and then this one becomes sort of a one-off? I'm just concerned that we have just sort of a mix
Sure.
of different buildings.
today we do not have an application in review for a new building that would be in a same situation as this.
So just to follow up on that, so I think I want to make sure the difference between new construction versus existing construction, abandoned now becoming occupied, having to comply, right?
Right.
So the specific example I'm thinking of, right? It's elsewhere, so the downtown doesn't apply. The downtown overlay doesn't apply. But if this exact same condition existed not downtown, would there be a requirement to have a stone facade on it?
So if you're not in the downtown area,
Yeah.
then stone is not a requirement. We cannot
So
regulate the materials
That
at
did
this
change.
point.
Okay.
Yeah, that
All
did
right. So
change.
that was
It
what I was
was-
asking earlier. That did
Yeah,
change.
it was a code somewhere, like maybe 2 years
So
ago.
it was a requirement in our Unified Development Code, and we still have it in our Unified Development Code. We just identify what the provisions are that from the state law that says that we cannot regulate the materials any longer. But we did not remove it 100% so that people also can see it and they can see the other buildings that have been constructed and use that as a guidebook.
Okay, all right. I think I was reading the UFC code different. Yeah.
Okay.
And Jeremy, can you talk to us about what the impact of a waiver would be on future development and future owners? Because if they're getting this waiver now, does that mean if they sell the property and other owners can move in as is without changing anything? Or when would this property be required to come into compliance?
Yeah, so that is it. This is a tipping point. This is one of those situations where if you were to approve this waiver today, the building, as long as it continues to be maintained, it doesn't go into the abandonment, it doesn't fall out of line there, would become basically a legally non-conforming kind of situation. At which point, they could continue to operate out of it, and the hands could change as long as there wasn't that abandonment or ceasing of the property.
And could they add on a second story? Could they add on to the other side of the property and maintain the waiver?
So the lot is divided into multiple lots. There's probably a potential that they could construct on other pieces of the property, but that would be required to come into compliance with the regular code. If there was to be an adjustment to this particular building, I think we're back at needing it to be in compliance. But that will be something that we will have to look at. So if there was to be an addition made, we will have to evaluate that further.
And if anyone made any changes to the facade, that would have to come back. As long as it's maintained exactly as it is within this waiver, it would never come back. But if there was a renovation, they wanted to change, it's like a future owner wanted to change this building's facade, but they have to ask for another variance since their change would not meet the code requirements.
So the way that, and legal can help with that, but I believe the way the answer to that would be that as long as they comply with what is provided here, then that would be consistent. If there was to be an additional adjustment, that would be something that we would need to come back on.
Yeah, and two, in y'all's UDC, you have a section on non-conforming structures and how they kind of operate within the confines of your UDC, and so that typically allows like maintenance of things, but when you begin to alter fundamentally, you can lose your non-conforming status at that point. So anything, if under this approval, it becomes non-conforming, it will then operate under your, I think it's chapter 8, on non-conforming. And so it'd have to comply with all of those various provisions to maintain legally non-conforming status.
And just to clarify, the lot's divided, there's multiple parcels, So any additional development that happens on that particular site has to be conforming. And the building if it's occupied and operating and still conforming with Section 8, then it continues existing as it is until such time as it's changed.
That's correct. That's correct. Unless something, I mean, I imagine an instance could come up with if they were developing, it impacts the main structure as we see it. So that would have to just be considered at that time. But generally speaking, that is correct.
If this is approved, does it place the city in a situation where other properties may have to be approved because this one is approved?
So this is a merit on its own. You could utilize that as well, that one did it, and so, but this is a situation that this is a unique application, and then you will review each application in its own merits. I will say that in staff's review of the different areas and looking at the different buildings that are within that surrounding area, it's not out of context with what we have in place today, and it's been in existence since 1970 or so.
It was the old dog.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Jeremy?
Just a curiosity. So I know we're not talking about site, but are they going, because it's like directly adjacent to this, isn't it kind of a, kind of dirt parking area that sometimes there's food trucks whenever we have events? Is that going to be developed at all within this, or is that separate parcels?
So it's one owner, but I believe it is multiple parcel. It's multiple lots.
So we're only talking about this specific lot of that entire property. That
Right.
other portion will not be touched.
That other part of the property isn't being considered with this waiver. So
Okay.
a granting of
So
a
nothing on the
waiver,
site, no improvements.
right? A granting of a waiver for the architecture is only related to this particular building. So if another building was to be constructed, it would need to comply with what the regulations are, or they would come forward to you for another waiver.
I was
But
more
it-
curious about site improvements, but
But it
Yeah,
is,
and site improvements will be something that we will evaluate
later.
Yeah. If this was to be approved, then their next step is to turn in a site plan that would show here's the elevations, and then the additional site improvements.
because the landscaping proposal included landscaping around the entirety of the property. There's trees. One of the pictures.
Yeah. They've represented
They
different.
represented that. So it is going to, the overall use of the property is going to have to involve some amount of work on that field. Right, we're just talking about the architecture waiver tonight,
Right.
but at least in some of the justifications, their discussion of landscaping and what they're going to do to the property overall implicates, and this is really more of a question for them. I'd like to hear what
Sure.
the plan is for that bare land.
All right, yeah, we can hear from them.
Yep.
And then once we hear from them, then we'll have discussion.
Robert, do you want to
I think they're the car company.
talk?
Through the short straw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no podium here, so.
Flip through it. I did not put the
site plan.
site plan in it.
Yeah, I saw that. And so understanding that this building cannot conform to the current architectural requirements of the Queen Anne or Richardsonian Romanesque, we wanted to help that along with we submitted a site plan that shows the current requirements of the downtown core of planters and benches and 15-foot setback with streetscape and planters and trees every 30 feet, site lighting, all those. So we do plan to improve the property. This is only for the architectural piece, but that was to help offset and mitigate that this doesn't fully conform.
Yeah.
If that helps.
What is your business?
I'm with Mod Architecture,
What is-
supporting the
okay.
current owner and the prospective owner.
And what are you? What's your business?
All right.
All right. Is it like autonomous cars?
Unfortunately, it doesn't have an
I
impact
know,
on
but
the
I would like to
application.
know.
They currently operate in downtown Pflugerville and
So-
are wanting to stay here.
So part of the architectural design was to demonstrate the full site, the full owned site developed, but the architectural impact is only for the lot that the building exists on. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so is that a consideration of all the additional landscaping and benches and things? Is that, I guess when we get to it or when you guys get to it, will that be included so that full site development will take place to accommodate the downtown overlay district
That's
and
correct.
that development? So that's all
Yes.
done kind of at once.
Right.
And then that site theoretically becomes developable and it's already in conformity with at least the public access parts.
Yep. If this is able to move forward, then we will move forward with the additional site plan and looking at all of the different elements that are required there and how that will come into play. But their first step was, can they go here?
Gotcha.
And their ability to go here is dictated on the architecture right now.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? All right. We will thank you for your report and we'll open discussion. All right. Fire away.
I was just gonna say, I think it's, they've been in downtown Pflugerville for some time, directly between Prost and Victory Tap. I think this is a huge improvement to what's there currently, and I think it's a reasonable request from my perspective.
Anybody else? Any further?
I agree. It's definitely an improvement. And it's nice to see a business that's downtown that wants to stay downtown.
Yeah.
You know, and then it opens up another spot for somebody else to come in. I just see it as an improvement in aesthetically and, something that would probably help downtown overall.
And I would say, I don't want to harp on the whole mural thing too much, but, I think that one thing that's nice is that there's a lot of flavor in downtown, and I would really recommend, it's going to be way nicer looking. The windows look great. The front facade is going to look so much better, the site improvements, but it would be really unfortunate if it didn't have some of that Pflugerville flavor
Like a mural
to
on
it,
the side?
instead of just like a big gray building. So that's, yeah, because it's really is in the middle of downtown. It can't meet that facade requirements, but yeah, I would highly encourage that there is some, over time, some flavor added to it to make it interesting and exciting.
Jeremy, do we have the opportunity to set such a requirement?
So I think paint is general. They're offering to paint the facade. I think that.
Yeah. And I think the gray is a great palette to eventually, maybe it's more of just a discussion item. I'm not saying that it needs to be a requirement to move forward. But with where it's at and being directly beside Pecan, kind of that main, part of downtown, it would be really nice if there were a little bit more art related things that brought more interest to what is essentially a very rectangular metal building.
Yes, I would say that one of the things, so we have an interesting downtown Pflugerville in that it's relatively undefined and the buildings are very, very varied. I mean, there's everything. There's a house next to an old restaurant, next to an old building, across the street from, all the things that are there.
Yeah.
The consideration, of course, is that as the Main Street development and all the recs and all that stuff gets built, that's going to drastically change the desirability of that area, in my opinion. And I think all things considered, it's a relatively stable stopgap in between. It's an in-between time, right? And I think that's what Pflugerville's experiencing in downtown specifically. If we have an opportunity to add some sort of language that says an artistic consideration or a beautification effort should be considered, is that something we could do? Because it seems like something that's said here.
From an enforcement perspective, that could be kind of difficult for for example, the mural, because it has to go through other boards, conditioning your approval on the approval of a board that you have no control over can create a kind of weird situation that I would recommend against. However, you do have some flexibility as it relates to design elements. So like in the UDC, it has a bunch of different pieces of design elements that relate to each architectural style. And so if you have a way to maybe get some of your pieces there, that would be a way that you could start to move down to what you're looking for. But based on what I'm hearing, the condition that's the like ideal, I would recommend against adding just from an enforceability standpoint.
But I think if you were to say that you were to paint it, I mean the allowance of paint, we're not saying that it has to be gray and it has to have the black trim with the orange.
I just wish there was a little bit more architecture
it's
to
a-
it.
To judge whether the art's good, right?
Yeah.
And we definitely-
Gray is art. Right?
I wish there was more
So-
architecture to this, like more
Is there,
something.
It's hard to dress up a
Can I
rectangle.
raise,
Go ahead.
raise some concerns, though?
Go ahead.
I agree generally with the idea that this would be a much better use than an abandoned building. 100%. But I struggle a little bit because y'all have described Pflugerville downtown as eclectic and diverse and different, which it is. But then we put this UDC in to steer it away from that. And I don't know that I don't believe I was around when we voted on that. I think it was already in. And maybe I agree. I probably did agree to it, and now I'm changing my mind. I don't know that it's a great idea to force it to be that, but we do have it now as the downtown development guidelines. So to then turn around and say one of the very properties that would be a candidate for a tear down and build up in the new code, we're not going to use that code we spent so much time putting together. I worry a little bit about it. I don't want y'all to leave, and I want y'all to stay here, and this is a good use. But I just worry that what does it mean going forward? Do other people come back and say, well, why do we have to meet this code when this building didn't? To your point, there weren't conversations about stonework. If you look at the other three corners around this intersection, they're all limestone buildings. They're all uniform. If we're not going to apply the downtown district, wouldn't we at least want them to match the other three buildings that are there? So I just think there's some
I mean, I'm okay with eclectic.
questions.
So I think those are very valid considerations, right? Because the word that comes to mind that we've been working on for the last 5 years is placemaking, right? So, and it's been discussed both in this room at this desk and dais, as well as in our Parks and Rec steering committee, that, Pflugerville's slogan for a long time was between a rock and a weird place. And so we're defining Pflugerville as a place between two other places that are more interesting, right? Because we use them to describe where we are as opposed to identity and creating that place. And so that Aspire 2040 plan and all the work that's gone on to that over the last 5 years, and then we've lived through that, and now we're about to go through it again. Those are really valid things, and as you consider too, that was where the nature of my questions were coming from previously. Is like, well, we can't specify the stone anymore. My recollection is that at the time that I was looking at something like this, it had to be. So it was a gray building that was considered abandoned, and then part of the expense of making it habitable or occupiable was that, well, we have to change the elevations and add some stonework, and there has to be some new skylights or valances or whatever, the protrusions out of the top of the ceiling. I think those are really valid too, because then you're getting closer just a little bit without significant expense of a tear down and a redo. All development comes with an expense in those things, and budget is obviously a consideration. But I mean, I agree with you there too, right? It's like, why create something that is kind of the vision for 10, 20, 50 years from now if we're not willing to accept what was agreed upon?
So I'm just wondering, is there a way that, to your point, it's architecture waiver right now, y'all are going to then be working on the rest of the site development plan. is there a way we could approve this waiver for the building, but with the requirement that the site development plan has to, in some way that staff is okay with, incorporate some level of stone just to tie it in with the other properties. They got their bench plan, I don't want to interrupt that, but have some kind of design aesthetic on the landscaping or some sort of short wall that's of stone. I don't know. I don't want to tell you what to do. But could we at least have some level of tie-in with the required stonework to have a nod to what its neighbors? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think it's a question for.
I mean, I think I hear it, they hear it, but I think that the site development component is completely independent of what we're here to do the architectural waiver on. And so if they had a need to vary from the site component, they'll have to go through the Board of Adjustment for anything there. But with regards to conditioning the architectural to something else that's out there, I don't think we have that.
Can I ask y'all that would adding some level of stone to the architectural plan, would that kill the project? I'm not an architect and I'm not an aesthetic person, so if it's going to look terrible, I'm not trying to force you down that road.
May I ask another question before they
please.
answer that? So is there a way, it doesn't have to be stone, but to make it more architecturally appealing? This is a warehouse building painted gray with pretty barn doors, with pretty
in our downtown.
in our downtown area. Like nothing, good job, but nothing is new here.
So
design-wise. Yeah, go ahead.
You have to come up here.
You have to come up here.
Please come up.
Do you know what I mean?
thank you, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Michael Wigler. I appreciate to be here with all of you. Happy New Year. So first, what we see over here is just rendering. We want our building to look nicer as well. We are proud of what we're doing. We company that opened in 2013. We serving U.S. Coast Guard, DoD, U.S. Air Force, FedEx in Tennessee, the main hub. We're doing fantastic and life is good. We want our building to be a diamond in downtown Pflugerville. And we decide downtown Pflugerville for a purpose. I could go to downtown Austin or Cedar Park or any one of the cities, but we love to be in downtown Pflugerville. We already have 2 buildings in downtown Pflugerville and we run out of space. So we have 117 and Main Street, East Main Street, and 113 East Main Street. We not have space anymore, so we need to start to search. And the building, what you see here is a gray building, by the way, is the wrong shade of gray.
Okay.
Okay, so, is without the lighting, so have some lights throughout the building, between each one of those, that's how we envision, and also the gutter over there is like, in the rendering, it stays the original one, but it's not. By the way, the entire side of First Street will love to have a mirror, but I not want to say it now, because it's maybe adding complexity, so I back up. And that's the first thing that I asked Jeremy when I came to the office, right? If it's happened, if we can have a mirror. So love to continue the coffee shop there. Now, the purpose of the place is actually mainly executive and high-level individual over here in the headquarters. So hopefully it's going to keep us for many years over here and be able to grow, and we have maybe the ability also to do site planning the other side. But the building going to be, and actually if you see the architectural outside space is really interesting and have some rock in there, because we believe that outside to have cool sitting areas and stuff like that, but that's different type of committee, correct? the outside area. So it's the structure going to be nicer than what we see in the picture over here, but that's what we can render to keep it minimalistic for you to see. We want to have elements of trees and we have the name of the business and stuff like that. So and it's going to be open. So we attract a lot of startup, and we belong to a lot of the startup community, and we have a lot of visitors, actually really interested people that came and visit us in our offices today. And we going to love to host. We actually going to host some downtown, hopefully Pflugerville event with the tech people for evening, and then they can tap into one of the bars in the area and enjoy. But it's a community place, and that's why we want the open door, even that is a private office, and we have private rooms that people be able to go in. But the idea is to host and enjoy. So hopefully it's not going to be too long, but I open to question if you need me. If not, I jump in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Of course, thank you. Any further discussion? Yes.
No, just want to statement. Just kind of piggyback off of what Robert was saying. First off, I don't like unoccupied buildings, so having a building occupied is always a good thing, period. But it just feels like, just through the conversation, that there's some middle ground to get a little bit closer to the downtown vision, because it's to the conversation we just had, to radically go away from it, just feels like we're just not taking that step to get there. So I don't know if there's better rendering, or maybe there's some other small incremental way to get just a bit closer. It just feels that way right now with the lack of any other data, that we just want to get a little bit closer to that architectural vision that we have. That's my initial reaction.
Okay, thank you. So I guess, is there any, so with an approval of this waiver, the building gets to continue exist, as is, and they redevelop it and use the site. With a denial of the waiver, then the applicant either has to choose to conform to the downtown overlay, or they have an opportunity to try again and come back at a certain point. Is that correct? With either any updates or considerations as part of, so if the applicant, say, if it were denied and the applicant had the opportunity to return and they added stone to it as part of their rendering in their own design plan at their own recommendation and design, then that would be an opportunity to come back and present. Is that well?
It could either be denied or postponed with those recommendations of, could you look at something instead of just a straight denial?
So postponing is better for them.
I would say a postponement.
Yeah.
Do we have, does the applicant have costs associated with redevelopment at this time?
Yes.
Hard costs?
Yes.
So we're at 50, 60% design, 90% design?
Yeah.
It's always expensive.
So this would allow for the kind of incremental development of that, knowing that downtown is going to be changing, knowing that we're going to have to be discussing the downtown overlay again with the UDC and with what's happening further east of here with the new city hall and the Monarch and things like that, and start looking at and having all those bigger conversations again to see, do we need to better define what incremental development would look like and what that means for the city, because we have so many that could be then benefited, be useful now, not remain vacant, and then be able to improve in the future. So this will just be the architecture of the building doesn't change too much except for additional windows and things, but the site actually comes into compliance, because that is not part of this request. So the site with the sidewalks and the street trees and things like that, that all has to comply with the UDC in the downtown.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a deal breaker. Yeah. So I'm Chad Backus. I'm actually the owner of the property, and Michael and his wife Daphne have been chasing me for 2 years for this property, by the way, and very persistent. And we've been under contract since about 5-6 months now, and we have continued to extend it 30 days. We started with the city, I think, back in November. So we're just now getting in front of you guys, trying to figure this situation out. It would be a deal breaker if this does not get approved from a time standpoint. And there is some costs associated. And that is because I'm willing to sell it because of the timeline. In February is when we're supposed to close. So this was going to help us get through that process so we could go on to the site plan and move forward. To to answer your question on the brick and stone, I'm a home builder actually up in Georgetown. There are many things that we can do to this facade to help it get there. The way the code reads with the Queens building and that, it just financially doesn't pencil, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
The landscaping that we've included on the site plan has some very nice steel benches with some concrete planters, I think, which is going to turn that whole corner into a beautiful place, and that's what they want. So I don't want to speak for you, Michael, but I think he's open to it, whether it be brick or stone. I mean, I think there is some components that can go into this building that will look really nice. And I think that's the intention here, honestly. This building does need some metal work already as it is, and he's wanting to do that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there that there is a timeline constraint here. So
Understood.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And I don't want to artificially say we require 5% stone or 10% stone or I just want a little tie into the neighborhood. I'm happy to wait.
Well,
I'm happy to approve now and let them figure it out.
So let me ask a question, Jeremy. So if the waiver is granted now, does this commission have an opportunity to set or to see or require any level of stonework, or is this the time do we do that?
So I would say that what they have presented today is that the facades that you've seen, without having a facade that tells you where that stone is going to be, and
Well, we don't, yeah. So
I don't know how
what we
to-
don't have is a drawing that says this is what we intend to build.
Right.
And this is our specs, right?
Yep.
And that puts us in the position of having to guess or postpone, which is totally possible and reasonable, and say, okay, well, we would like to see an elevation that has some stonework on it, right? If it had arrived that way and we would have seen that, okay, yeah, it seems applicable and that's fine. And so a postponement would give anybody an opportunity to do that, for us to architecturally say, yes, this is the middle ground. The issue that you've raised is that since we don't have a middle ground plan, that's on us, right? We don't have anything to say, well, for a building that's non-conforming, that's existing, that's undergoing change, then you have to do X, Y, Z. We don't have that yet. However, what this does get us is the improvement of the half acre to the west, which is the improvement of the benches and the trees and the landscaping. And this just building exists and could, in theory, exist for the next 50 years in its present condition and et cetera, or at such time as it becomes more desirable, vacated and torn down, and in which time it would have to be built completely. So it sounds like there's opportunity for both sides, for both the city to make improvements in their processes, but then also for the applicant to present something that would have complied today and given us a roadmap for that. Based on the fact that, based on all those considerations, it seems, well, I have my own vote, but those are things that, if there's anything else that we need to discuss on that, we should.
Yeah, my only worry about postponing is I don't want this to fall through. I don't,
Well, he said he was going to fall through.
Well, what's important to understand at this commission is that our responsibility is to the citizens,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
the plans that we have, not
No,
just
I agree.
individuals, and we've
Nope,
covered
totally
that many
agree.
times.
Yeah, I'm not debating that portion.
Of course.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that anybody wants to discuss? Or anything in addition to? All right. Thank you. I'll accept the motion to close discussion.
So move.
Is there a second? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Discussion is closed on this item. I'll accept a motion to either approve the variance request or deny the variance request in a second.
I make a motion.
So it's going to be the waiver.
Excuse me, the waiver. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me read that correctly.
I make a motion to approve the waiver.
We have a motion to approve the waiver. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Lively discussion. Well done.
We should approve and a great building.
All right, thank you. So next we'll move on to item 7. The commission welcomes comment on the following items. Each person providing public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. Yes. And will be asked to state his or her name and address for the public record. We have Do we do public? Do I read it first and then we do public comment?
I would read the item. And
Read the item. Okay, so item 7A is to conduct a public hearing and approve an application for the replat of Windermere Park Garden Villas Section 2, consisting of lots 5, which is a 4.841 acre lot, and lot 4, which is a 1.123 acre lot, totaling 5.964 acres of land situated in the Windermere Park in Travis County, Texas, RP 2025-000349. And then, do you present and then it's public comment? Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight's replat is for lots 4 and 5 of the Windermere Parks Garden Villa Section 2. The subject property, did that change? Yeah. Subject property is located southeast of the Grand Avenue Parkway and West Black Locust Drive intersection, and it is that total of the 5.9 acres in size. This is a little different than most replats that we normally see or that we're going to see where we're looking at subdividing property or redrawing boundary lines. For this request, the replat is intended to establish the correct location of the drainage easements for lots 4 and 5 and show the locations of the floodplain. All improvements within the site will be reviewed by city staff at the time of site development and in the process with the Unified Development Code. This property is zoned the MF10, that's the multifamily 10 residential district, and the driveway locations, lighting, parking, buildings, detention ponds, and all other development-related items will be addressed at the time of site plan. So there's no changes to the zoning here. This is just looking, strictly focused on looking at the location of the drainage easements and the floodplain locations. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
None for me.
Anybody? All right, no questions. All right, we do it. Thank you very much. We do have public comment on the item. I would like to call Urcha Dunbar Crespo to the lectern, please. And if you'd please, hello. If you please state your name and your address for the record, please.
I will. Good evening, everyone. My name is Urcha Dunbar Crespo, and I live at 1230 Disraeli Circle. It's within 200 feet of this area that you're replatting. And my concern is that it's looking at drainage and the floodplain. This area is prone to flooding. I live across the street, and this developer built townhomes behind me. That's a whole nother issue. But my biggest concern is that you take a real close look at the drainage because the area is prone to flooding, and I know that I don't want my property to move into a higher cost flood zone. When I bought my house in 1994, I was not in a flood zone, but I bought flood insurance just as a precaution. Over the years, it increased. We were told that the developer would make sure that whatever they built back there didn't affect the flood zone. Well, that didn't come to fruition. We are now in a 100-year flood zone, and my flood insurance has gone from $251 a year to over $1,000 a year. So I noticed the comment 17 on the replat document. It says this subdivision shall mitigate post-development peak runoff rates for the 2-year, 25-year, and 100-year storm events. My concern is if that doesn't happen, I could go from 100-year to 25-year to maybe even 2-year, and you know what? My flood insurance goes sky high. Many of my neighbors don't have flood insurance, so I'm asking that you guys take a real close look, including city staff, at what this developer does with this, and also the site plan, because I have a whole nother issue with the site plan. 3 of the townhomes look directly down on my property. I have no privacy. And if the developer does the same thing on the other side, I'm not only going to have a flooding potential issue because now there's concrete instead of ground, I may have other townhomes looking down into my backyard. And that's something that until you live it, you don't know what it's like to go to sit on your back porch to have a cup of coffee or read a book, and you got neighbors looking right at you, and you could hear them on the phone and see them. And so fortunately, my area has not flooded. But when it rains for any number of days, I'm looking at the drainage ditch, and I've seen it get up to 3/4 high. But if you build on the other side and you don't do proper drainage, that could cause additional higher water, possibly flooding in my area. So I'm just asking that you take a close look at this. The developer says they'll do certain things. They don't always do it. And I think the developer is a respectful man, but money talks more than action. So I'm just saying, please take a look, close look at what they do so that my neighbors don't end up in a 25-year floodplain. Because on their side, they have flooded some of their backyards. Mine hasn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Oh, Andrew, do you
Second.
mind
Oh,
if
yeah.
I?
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
Do you mind if I ask one question for staff real quick?
Of course,
Did
please.
you raise the question of the floodplains? What floodplain map are we using? Are we just using FEMA's floodplain map, or is it just what the developer said, or?
I believe we're going into FEMA is what we're looking at on the map here. And at the time of site development plan, that will be reviewed by engineer just to see, if there's the detention pond would be required as well. And there is a requirement that you can't increase the stormwater runoff to the neighboring tracts. That will be addressed at the time of site plan as well.
Okay. So I do know there are issues with the FEMA maps, and there's a whole new thought of better flood planning. That's well beyond our scope, but sounds like we're at least checking. So.
Okay, yeah, I believe we have another gentleman who just arrived. Hello and welcome. Made it just in time.
Looks like I did.
I'd like to ask Brian, is it Clifton?
Yes, sir.
All right, if you please state your name and address for the record.
Brian Clifton. I'm at 1239 Blackthorn Drive, and my property would back up directly to that plat. 3 houses down from Ursher on the other side of the street. So, having seen what was done behind her house, where they removed 100% of the vegetation from a 200-yard easement, my concern, along with hers, is the flooding and having that mitigated. There are also a number of 10 to 12 inch trees that are not within 20 feet of the creek bed that are between our property, the residential property, and the creek bed that could still remain and be used to prevent soil erosion, provide wildlife habitat, and a privacy screening. Because I know when they came through before, everything was just bulldozed. And those larger trees are not right on the fence line, so when they come in to replace it, it wouldn't impede that progress either.
Okay. Yeah, we can just hear from you.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my concern.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have another arrival that wishes to speak? Did somebody come in?
The applicant that maybe can speak on it if you would like.
I beg your pardon?
This is the applicant that may be able to speak if you have any specific questions.
All right. I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close.
Is there a second? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Public comment has been closed. Yes.
Yeah, hi. My name's Thomas. We go over the engineers for this project. I just wanted to address some of the concerns that they might have. You actually already have a site development permit for this particular project. We've also gone through the FEMA application process, which is a conditional letter of map revision. That's taken into account the Atlas 14 that was recently adopted in 2019. So you should not have any flooding concerns, really. So I don't understand why your insurance rates went up, but we are and have taken into account the updated rainfall data as part of the site development that was permitted by the city as well. So the updating of the easement is really just to show where that easement is going to be now. So you shouldn't have any concerns by this.
All right. if you don't mind, it's addressed to the commission, if that's all right.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. Okay, so this opportunity to discuss. So so it looks like there's a vegetation line, and then it appears to be a silt fence that I can see on Google Earth.
Oh, yes. So as part of the site development permit, we have a erosion sedimentation control plan that's going to also meet all of the standards from TCQ to FEMA.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, that was for that one. All right.
That's all good.
Okay, I do have a question for our city staff, whoever knows on this. So is that vegetation line has a certain privacy value, but also I got to imagine it takes up acreage that would be considered part of the development. Is that right? I'm just looking at the tree line. Let's take a guess here. From the estimated fence line of a particular property, it's about 60 feet or so. Is that right?
I believe the distance, if you're talking about lot 4, is 73 feet on the southern end and then 55 on the northern. That's what you're referring to.
I'm on between the houses that are addressed on Blackthorn. Behind those houses, there's about a 60-foot strip of vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can see a silt fence on the map. Is this the site development and everything? Does it encroach on that vegetation line?
It shouldn't. So the drainage easement actually dedicated doesn't allow us to encroach into those areas. So we had to set those easement lines and the ESC controls kind of following those easements.
So I'm looking at the drawing that was submitted. So it looks like lot 4 on this particular drawing, or on the engineering plan. Lot 4 is
it's a drainage lot.
73 feet deep. So that retains the current 60 or so foot vegetation.
That's correct. We can't even grade into that area.
Understood.
Yeah.
And then is that looking at is that a 2-track road or is that a drainage channel that goes? That's a 2-track. So that's a true drainage easement. So that means there's.
Yeah, it's an absolute V channel. Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then is there any detention work that's required?
So as part of the FEMA and submittal to the city, we carried out a hydraulic analysis that proved that there was no rise from our development. So no, there is no detention required.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Wait, to clarify, I guess because we're not seeing exactly what they're developing, but if they develop it, they would have to have detention to handle the development on there, but no additional detention is needed to reduce where the 100-year floodplain is to develop in the area that they want to develop it.
Correct, they just can't have adverse impact offsite.
Okay.
Yes.
So detention will be needed, but not detention without developing the land.
No detention required. No additional detention required now.
Now.
Develop the site. Site
Required.
detention as developed.
Yeah. Okay.
Did we get that right?
I believe so.
Okay.
All right.
I just
great.
wanted to clarify.
Yeah,
Because whenever I said no detention, kind of short-circuited. Yeah.
Okay, so the public is closed. Is there any discussion on the item? All right, I will.
Can I just reiterate one
ahead.
thing, just for the folks that are here? One of the concerns was related. Am I allowed to?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, of course.
Am I allowed to discuss their comments? I'm just not.
You're allowed to talk
directly
to
address
us.
them.
You're allowed to talk to us.
Oh, okay.
yes.
Okay, great. So one of the main concerns I heard was the 100-year floodplain, but what we're hearing and seeing on here, and based off of what the developer has said, is that the 100-year floodplain is where it shows on this plan and is not made worse in the adjacent residential areas based off of what they're doing currently. And this is showing the most current Atlas 14 100-year floodplain. And the other concern was related to the vegetation, having that buffer directly for the houses that are off Blackthorn Drive. and that easement, that drainage easement, is significantly wider than what the vegetation area is. So that vegetation area will not be impacted because they will not be developing where that easement is located. So I just wanted to reiterate that for those that stuck around to listen. And is
Based
that
on-
a correct summary from what we're seeing here and what the developers said?
And the only thing I would add is I believe some of those trees were actually protected per the UDC, so some of them won't.
Oh, and they're protected. Some, yeah, the bigger trees are protected, so they wouldn't be touched. Yeah, and so that easement is technically, is that a city? That's a city easement? Is that correct? The
It should be-
drainage
yeah, it
easement?
should be
So only the
dedicated by
city could come in and remove that vegetation. The
If they
developer
needed
could
to
not.
for drainage.
Yeah, if they needed to for drainage. Okay. Just
There's
wanted to
but there's a
reiterate that.
chance, just to be clear, there's a chance that the vegetation could be mitigated should the city determine
It's
that
needed.
at a certain level it must be.
At a certain point,
Yeah.
if it was necessary for the drainage, then it could happen.
Is there like an alert that goes out, like you send a letter, we're gonna be removing some of these trees?
Likely not, because it's for the betterment of the community and the drainage.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on the item? Then I will accept either a motion to approve the item or deny the item with a second.
Motion to approve?
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Who seconded?
Second.
Sorry, okay, thank you.
The ayes have it. Okay. Very good. Item approved. Wonderful. This concludes our meeting. I adjourn our meeting at 8:26.